So let's start today. We have our first speaker. And I was just speaking with Ben, our first speaker. And I'm just going to give you a little spiel. So Ben is now a Chief Finance and Operating Officer at Parkinson's UK. Previously, he was Chief Operating Officer at Asthma Lung UK. He met Henry on Common Purpose session. And from that, he read the Happy Manifesto. And he said it was the first time he had read a leadership book that made sense to him. Okay. And then Henry put a little note here for me to read out, and that he's very stylish with his shirts. And yes, he is. But even more, check out the shoes.
Yeah, I've gone on brand today. Yeah, I'll come around later.
So please welcome Ben.
I mean, I can shout, but it will spare my voice. Thanks for the warm welcome, everyone, and thank you, Maureen. So, yes, I mean, I don't really need to do this now because she's just told you everything. But basically, this is the story about how how I stole Henry's ideas and applied them in my previous job. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how I'm going to steal them again and apply them in my new job. 1 second. As much as I like the sound of my own voice, I need a drink, so I will get thirsty as I go through. So let's. Oh, gone the wrong way. That was the first error there. I'm an accountant, hence the title of today's speech: turning errors into assets, building a culture of trust by celebrating mistakes. But someone once said to me, in fact, on the course where I met Henry, they said, "Ben, you're not really a typical accountant." And I think that was probably understating it slightly. I'm not really a typical accountant at all. And my last couple of jobs have been all the kind of back office functions, so technology, governance, things like that. And I have had responsibility for people in HR as well. So just to give you a bit more about me and how I got here, to give you the context. I'm currently at Parkinson's UK, where I'm Chief Finance and Operating Officer. Been there just under a year. Before that, I spent 5 years at Asthma Lung UK. That's a charity that was formed from a merger of Asthma UK and the British Lung Foundation. So that's a bit of the story. And I've also worked for a couple of other charities, London Community Foundation, Macmillan Cancer Support. I trained with the now defunct Audit Commission, so I started my life as a public sector auditor. That was too rock and roll for me, so I had to get out. I'm also a fellow of CIPFA, which is my accountancy body, and I'm on their Charities and Public Benefit Entities Forum. I don't know what that means either. I've been a trustee of a small charity called Lewisham Speaking Up, and I'm a trustee of the National Charity Contact, which is a terrible name, but it's a charity that supports families with disabled children. So been around in the sector a fair bit. And when I'm not doing things like that, I like to do silly things like cycle 50 odd miles to get decent fish and chips in Hastings. I am very fond of running around advertising my employers, or other people's employers, clearly from the yellow shoes. And I also like to run around after these three miscreants who can't take a decent photo, including the middle one there, who is sort of going like that with his fist in the style of a contestant from Gladiators. Yeah, that's his go-to pose. So how does all this matter? How is it all relevant? In doing all this stuff, so back when I was in audit, the government abolished my employer, which is very nice of them because it forced me to get out of audit. And I could have gone into the private sector, nothing wrong with that, but it forced me to think about what I wanted to do with my life. And I thought, if I'm going to have to spend so much of my life working, then I might as well enjoy it. You know, I think I'm going to be working till I'm 70, 75 probably. I actually have to do quite a lot of hours to get my job done, but why not do something I enjoy? So that's what brought me into the charity sector. So I got a job at Macmillan Cancer Support. I'd been there a couple of years, been promoted, really enjoying it. And I was in my kind of early stages of leadership. So it's probably worth confessing that as part of my accountancy, I had to study a module called Leadership and Management, and I scraped a pass by 1 mark. So when I say that I'd never read a leadership book that made sense, that's very true. I really hadn't until I met Henry. So a few years into my time at Macmillan, I was on the Common Purpose American Express Leadership Academy, and Henry is doing a little sort of session called a cafe conversation, so with a small group, and as he's talking, I'm sitting there thinking, this guy's basically saying all the things I think. This is exactly what I'm trying to do. So I said, and I knew he'd mentioned he'd written a book about it. I said, oh, Henry, where can I get your book? And he just reaches into his bag and he's got about 10 of the things. And he's like, there you go. So of course, I read it and I thought, and I genuinely did think, this makes sense. This is exactly the sort of philosophy I've got, and I'm going to start putting it into practice. I'm going to fast forward a little bit then. So 2019, I joined Asthma UK just before they merged with the British Lung Foundation, and we merged just before the global pandemic hit. That's a whole different presentation, but a lot of that meant that we had to kind of build a new culture, two organisations coming together. What better opportunity to start nicking Henry's ideas and turning them into something. So as part of that job, I was responsible for people, culture, officially. That was within my remit, although I think everyone's responsible for that, not just the person whose job it is to look after HR, but that's another story. And so I came up with a framework for our values, behaviours and enablers. And this was about trying to capture the essence and the energy of the organisation that had already kind of come about 2 years into this merger, as well as some aspirational things that we thought would help us on our journey. And we were trying to be very different to our predecessors. We were harnessing the energy of what we'd done through the pandemic to become a much more courageous and ambitious organisation, trying to kind of punch above our weight, hence the kind of wonky plus pink and orange brand. It's much more in your face than anything we'd done before. So I came up with a framework that I also stole from Southwest Airlines, which is basically a triangle of values, behaviours and enablers that all interact with each other. I should just say, accountants aren't allowed to be creative. That's why I steal all my ideas. It means something very different. And just to give you an example of some of those, so there's a couple of enablers that might look familiar to anyone who's read the Happy Manifesto. So freedom within clear boundaries was a really crucial part of what we were doing. We had already established a really kind of trust-based culture there. But what we wanted to do was make sure that people had that framework in which to work. So we'd done a lot already, but we kind of said to people, look, it doesn't work if you just go and do your own thing. That's not good for you, it's not good for us. What we want to do is empower you by giving you a clear set of frameworks. So we spent a lot of time incrementally improving that over time, making the planning process better, for example, so people knew where the boundaries were, and then we created a kind of empowering culture. But I mainly want to talk about celebrating mistakes. Celebrating mistakes as well as successes I put on there because if you just say celebrating mistakes, sometimes people don't quite know what you mean. And it's all about learning. So that point about the road to success not being linear. So I'm going to give a little case study of where this really came into its own. So I've already mentioned this is a charity that's kind of going in a new direction. It's trying to be a bit bolder. One of the new things that we did was a focus on clean air. It's a respiratory charity. It's not really rocket science to think that clean air might be useful if you've got a lung condition, but we hadn't really touched that area before, and we saw it as a way to get new audiences in. People who wouldn't necessarily engage in respiratory generally, which is a bit of a kind of unsexy thing. People don't really think about lungs, so we were thinking, can we get them engaged in a kind of quasi-environmental way? And we were trying to be quite punchy and bold. Maybe we got a bit too punchy and bold. One summer, we were gearing up for the party conference season. And that year, the Conservatives and Labour were in Liverpool and Manchester, respectively. I forget which one was which. And we came up with a series of billboard ads. This is not the most shocking. I've been quite careful, especially because I stole this off the internet. There's a running theme here, isn't there? But some of them were quite specific. So they would say things like, X number of people in Liverpool will suffer horrible consequences of air pollution. Similar things for Manchester. And we spent money and time knocking all this up, planning for all of it, but no one actually thought to check whether or not we'd be allowed to put them up. Until the last minute, when the councils, both of them respectively, said, no, you're not putting up things that terrify our residents in that way. Things that make us look bad are not welcome. You can target the politicians coming in, but you can't say something about that. And by that point, it was too late. Too late to do new creative, too late to change it. It got pulled, and we lost money on it. Thankfully, not all of it, because the commercial organisation we were working with took pity on us and gave us some credits to do some other stuff later. So that was generosity rather than contractual obligation. And I came back from holiday to discover this had happened, and there was this long email trail from people kind of pointing the finger, and someone saying, you know, this is outrageous. You should have done all this. And I just jumped straight in, and I said, okay, here's a chance to understand what we mean by celebrating mistakes. Something's gone wrong, but we've learned from it, and we're going to have to take risks. It's in our values and behaviours and enablers framework. We're going to have to take risks if we're going to pull this stuff off. And sometimes it's going to go wrong, and that's okay, as long as we learn from it. And we've learned from it. You can see from everything you've done, you've taken stock, you can see what's going on. And okay, there were a couple of people in my team who were a bit like, oh, you know, here he goes again. But actually the team who were responsible for this, you could see they felt safe, they felt protected. Here's the second in command for the organisation coming along and going, it's all right, you're not in trouble. Something's happened. Let's learn from it and we'll share it. But the really proud dad moment, as I call it, comes a few months later when we had our all-staff conference. And the middle of the day was a chance for each directorate to stand up and share something that they'd been working on in that year. This was in December. And I thought it'd be nice if we put up some things that didn't quite work. And I persuaded the team who did this to stand up in front of the entire organisation and hold their hands up and say, we tried this, we cocked it up. This is what happened. This is what we learned. And my colleague who had been leading on this did an absolutely brilliant job of standing up and being humble and just kind of saying, this happened. It encouraged the next person who spoke to talk about another project we've been working on, to be a bit more candid about some of the things that had gone wrong. And the person facilitating that day came to me at the end of that session and he said, I'm just blown away by the culture you guys have got here. Like, most organisations wouldn't be able to do that. They wouldn't have someone stand up and get a round of applause for saying they spent a load of money on something that didn't work. And I think it just kind of summed up what we'd created there, because that energy is what drove that organisation forward. You know, that kind of willingness to try things, to be a bit different, was meant that we could punch above our weight. There were lots of other things I did at Asthma Lung UK as well, but I need to give myself and my voice a break. So I'm going to give you a little job to do here. So I want to put the question back to you. Can you think about a time when something's gone wrong and you could have celebrated mistakes, to use the Happy Manifesto terminology, or you could have done something to kind of show what could be learned from it, but instead you chose to penalise, to tell off, to discipline, whatever it might have been, that maybe you could think about what could have been different if you'd handled it differently. And if you can't, or actually you do this, think about examples of where you have done it and where it's worked. And maybe discuss in pairs or in small groups for a few minutes, and then we'll get some examples shared. Is that all right? Yeah? Okay, let's go. We'll say 5 minutes to discuss, and then we'll come back.
Values is an interesting point, because I think it's really easy to throw around buzzwords, isn't it? But you're not actually
and I even went back and it doesn't feel right. So what I learned from that, control is actually I don't work on
There we are. Thank you. Let's come back. There we are. Thank you. There we are. So I need assistance with these things. Thank you, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that discussion. I wondered if we might have a couple of people brave enough to share when they've made the mistake of not celebrating a mistake. There we go. Anyone willing to share? Be brave. Hey, there we go. Can you tell us your name as well?
I'm Tim Jones.
Sweet Tim.
I think one of the mistakes we've made of not celebrating a mistake in the past is where a mistake has happened through, potentially human error or something like that, but with good intentions. we have celebrated the positive outcome of that being that maybe 15 people or 20 people have woken up on a Sunday morning to help swarm around the issue and fix it. And we've celebrated that being we've got a bunch of people who are really happy to support others rather than focus in on why did the mistake happen in the first place. Maybe because we don't want an individual or a couple of individuals to feel bad about something they've done with good intentions. So we celebrate and go, that's brilliant. Actually, we've got a load of people that are happy to come and help pick up the pieces, which is brilliant as well.
Yeah.
But actually, we haven't learned from what caused the mistake in the first place, which we could have celebrated both.
Do you think you do it differently?
Yes, I think we should do it differently. I don't think we do at the moment, if I'm honest. So, but I think the more we get others to think about it in that way as well and help build the people up around it to ensure the trust. Because they might not have felt bad if they celebrated a mistake. That's a perception as well.
Yeah.
So having a discussion with them on, like you did with your colleagues, to bring them to celebrate a mistake is the first step in it.
Yeah.
And some people won't feel good about it. And seeing like, as you develop that out as a thing you do repeatedly, pick the people and the times you do it with to make it safe. But that's definitely something I'd worry about.
Yeah, I think that's a key point. It's about finding those opportunities to role model it and do it. That tends to make it more embedded. You can do things structurally, so having like a culture of having post-implementation reviews and honest appraisals is all good. I found that we often tended to think about all the things that have gone wrong and forget the actual successes, which is why I had to call it celebrate mistakes as well as successes, because we were almost too far the other way. But I think that's a really, really good point. And that is celebrating mistakes in action because you're recognising that it could have been better and doing it differently. So I think it deserves a round of applause. Thank you. Not least for your bravery in going first as well. Would anyone else like to have a round of applause by going over here? Yeah.
Yeah. So years ago, where I became manager in an organisation, and I hadn't been in the organisation that long, and I was quite young at the time. And one of my sort of senior people in the team had been there a little bit longer. He was a bit older than me, and he probably a bit of a fractious relationship about our status in the organisation. But anyway, the company was Jacob's Biscuits. In my department, we took all the chocolate from deliveries came into in big 12-ton chocolate vats that we had, big agitators that used to keep the chocolate flowing. And Mark was the guy who was responsible for taking in those orders of chocolate. And we had quite an antiquated system from years ago as well, where the chocolate was brought in. He would get up into a platform, he'd look in with a little torch into the top of the chocolate vat, check the levels, and then say to the driver, yeah, we could take 5 ton of chocolate into this particular vat. Yeah. On this particular day when he was doing it, he was looking inside of the chocolate vat and he dropped the torch into the chocolate. So he comes to me in my office, which is a very responsible thing, and he says, Steve, we have a problem. I said, what's the problem? I've dropped the torch into the chocolate. And I said, well, Mark, I'll tell you what, I'll give you 24 hours to try and find a solution and see how you get on. And 24 hours later, I kept walking in and out to see what he was at. There was all things going on, little bits of string in him. That, to be honest, probably I would have thought that this could be a solution or whatever, you know, and it didn't work out anyway. So he wasn't very happy. After 24 hours, he came back to me and says, I haven't found a solution. I said, well, leave it with me. So in the end, what I did is I grabbed 2 other colleagues and then we got a winch. And we went into the platform up there, carried the winch up the top as well, and we put a chain on it, and we put me in a hazmat suit, and connected me to the winch, and dropped me into the chocolate.
Augustus Gloop style.
Because if the winch breaks and you're in the you die. You die because you can't swim in chocolate. But I found the cord and I brought it back and I got it out. And I said it to Mark, I got the chocolate out, but at no stage did I recognise that the system that we had was antiquated, having a torch in this. And I should have involved him, and his back got up about this because it was like, you know, I went off and solved it without involving him at all. And really, to be honest, and he was a great guy, and it would have made him more involved and more connected to me if I'd allowed him to be able to be involved in the whole process. And I look back at my older version of me, look, I should have done it so much differently. Yeah.
Ah, that's good to be honest. Thank you for sharing. Definitely deserves a round of applause, I think. When you said he dropped a torch in the chocolate, I thought that was going to be the origin story of light chocolate, but no. Sorry, thank you. Yeah, it's worth a groan. If I don't get a groan in a presentation, I'm not doing a good job. Thank you. Okay, right. We've probably run out of time for this section, but when we come to the Q&A at the end, if anyone's burning to share another story, we might be able to do one. So I thought I would just bring it forward to show you how I love a formula. I love to do the same thing again and again because it works. So this is also taken from Asthma Lung UK's values framework. So it gives you a bit of an insight into how we did some of this stuff. That's the definition of the value in the big text on the left, and then there is a list of the behaviours and enablers that go with it, and each of those has a definition behind it, like the ones I showed you earlier. But the reason I've put this one up here is because I just want to show the continuation of a theme, because I'm now at Parkinson's UK. We're also pushing for better. Who'd have thought it, a charity pushing for better? Partly because the same brand consultant did our rebrand as did Asthma Lung UK's, and that's always good to recycle the same material. But since these things go hand in hand with what we're trying to do, it lends itself to some of the same thinking. Now, in my new job, I'm no longer responsible for people and culture in terms of the team, but exec directors, we're all responsible for these things. But in particular, I'm responsible for the culture within the operations team that I lead, which is about 80 people. And there's some really great people. When I arrived, I thought, wow, I'm really lucky. There's some real talent here. My God, we've made it difficult for them. It's just so difficult to get anything done. The organisation has made it hard to work here. It's made it hard to volunteer for us. But our heart's in the right place. Like, we're out there talking to people with Parkinson's all the time, hearing what they need, and then promptly doing nothing with what they've told us, which is not particularly helpful. We're also, much like pretty much any major charity out there, going on a journey of modernisation. We've got systems that are from the 90s, which half the sector has got, that we're trying to get rid of. And we hadn't got the best track record on those things. We had a couple of high-profile failures in the past, both cases because we massively overcomplicated it. And that had led to a bit of a culture of mistrust. There was definitely this fear of failure that I could observe, to the extent where just even a small thing like launching a new electronic expenses system, they wouldn't commit to a go live date because they were too frightened that if they slipped, they would be penalised. I was like, wow, this is okay, this is interesting. So huge culture change required within my team to help modernise the rest of the organisation. And we're right in the middle of that kind of right now. So I am actually going back to the office after this because we are in the middle of a change programme, which is, they're always difficult, but quite a lot of people are coming to me going, I can't wait, this is really good, I really like what you're doing. So it keeps me going. People with Parkinson's tell me it's what we need, so I keep going. But of course, really what it comes down to is how do you execute it. So I'm going back to the playbook, and I'm basically going to use some of the same ideas. So I thought I'd share a little bit about my thinking for that too. So this is something that I think I've been sharing with my team that I think defines a little bit around who we are as a team, this idea of being relentless doers. This again comes from our kind of brand work that we've done. We see ourselves as a charity, as relentless doers, and there's a kind of official Parkinson's UK version of this that is about the charity, but this is me translating it for operations. And to underpin all of that, I've been working on a team charter, which is basically a set of values, but because I'm only doing it in my directorate, I've called it a team charter. But you'll see a lot of the same ideas are creeping in. So right people in the right roles, we can empower people to deliver. So we're really going for the empowerment thing. There's a touch of recruit for attitude, train for skill going in there with the right people in the right roles. The clarity thing here, responsibilities aren't clear. We ask and we clarify. We give people freedom to operate within guidelines that ensure they're clear on expectations and their authority. We haven't done that. It's really difficult. We've got these talented people, and we've made the guidelines wonky. They're all over the place. So no one knows how to get anything done. No one knows what they've got authority to do, which produces one of two outcomes. They stand still, or they go flying off over here, not delivering the thing that you want. And that's partly why we've struggled to deliver things successfully. When I arrived, as an example, I had to stop a CRM program that had started 3 times already because they were just going to drive it into a wall because they were going about it in the wrong way. And of course, that was my first opportunity to not penalise people for failure. I could role model it and I could say, no, actually, you've done a good job. You've done what I understand why you've done what you've done, but we have to do this. We have to do this properly to succeed. And we'll be honest about it. So a little bit of the kind of celebrating mistakes. And I think that started to set the tone a little bit. I've also got in here, linked to that relentless doers idea, the courage to try and risk failure. So again, it's a bit like the kind of stuff I talked about Asthma Lung UK. Let's be brave, let's be bold. If it goes wrong, you will not be sacked. You will be kind of given an opportunity to learn from your mistakes. And I think that's really important for rejigging how we work. I realised I missed one other thing up here. We're pushing for better right here, right now, and better never stops is also in the Asthma and Lung UK values framework. So I really do just keep using the same ideas again and again. But this point here about being accountable to each other as well is all about that driving that kind of culture where we all work together as one team. I want my people to be happy, motivated. It really isn't rocket science. Happy people are more productive. I mean, it's like, who'd have thought it? But trying to create these conditions is what I'm really going for. And I thought I'd just sort of finish up before we do Q&A by talking a bit more about the theme of recruiting for attitude, which is again something that I've done, I've found very successful in my previous jobs, and I'm hoping it will prove the case here. So if I just go back to my last job again, so recruit for attitude again was another key principle. Back there we had, you know, around and the size of the organisation and the amount of money we had was such that we couldn't necessarily afford to pay the highest wages. But what we kind of went with was what a couple of us called the Brentford model, which only means anything to football fans. But what we really meant was let's recruit people who are hungry and ambitious, driven, possibly taking a step up, and invest in them. The reason we call it the Brentford model is because Brentford Football Club are famous for doing this. As a fan of Brentford. I'm not personally a Brentford fan, but I'm a big admirer of what they do. Of course, the difference is we can't sell staff. So you can't, unfortunately, I tried. You can't sell your staff for millions of pounds. It's illegal. But you can invest in them and get the best out of them. So that was a key part of our model there for driving that talent pipeline to get sort of part of that punching above our weight. We could bring in people, give them a chance they might not get somewhere else, and see them grow. And that worked time and time again. And those of you who've listened to me waffle on Henry's podcast with Maureen as well will have heard this story before. But I think the best example of this was when we had a vacancy in our finance team. And the recruiter called me up and said, Ben, I've got this candidate and the hiring manager's rejected her because she doesn't have any management experience. But I know you talk about this recruit for attitude thing, and I think this person is exactly what you're looking for. She's talented, she's got the right attitude, she's capable, she's going to go really far, and I think she's the sort of person that you would like. He said, but I don't want to go round her back, you know, I don't want to like be going to the boss, you know. He said, so I said, all right, leave it with me. So I went and had a word with her, and I said, look, this has been flagged to me, and it's entirely your call. I'm not going to tell you you need to interview this person. I'm just going to say, remember what we say we stand for, and then look at it again and see if you come to a different decision. And she said, yeah, what was I thinking? That was daft. She turned out to be the best candidate for the job by a mile. She was absolutely brilliant. She'd never managed anyone before. It didn't matter. We just trained her. We showed her what to do. She had the natural kind of ability and the right attitude generally. She's still flying there now, and at some point, I'm sure I will poach her for another job at some point because she's very, very talented. So I plan on doing the same again. And a key part of that is going to be building up the leadership team I have around me. So I have a couple of vacancies, and I'm going through the process of changing the structure. So there's a new leadership role coming in there. And the focus of the recruitment for those roles is going to be on alignment with that set of kind of mini values, which essentially are plagiarised from the Happy Manifesto. So essentially what I'm looking for is people who believe in that, who can drive that forward. And that's because I believe that culture change is going to be the biggest ingredient in our success. Yes, I want people who've got experience, of course. I'm not, you know, going to just put someone in completely inappropriate role because that's setting them up to fail. But if I've got two people and one of them is much more aligned with that culture than the other, that's who I'm going to go for. So I want to get to a point where I've got a unit around me who are all on the same page, much like I'd got to before. And I think that's going to be the biggest factor in whether or not we achieve what I've set out, which is that over the next few years, we're going to get Parkinson's UK, or rather its infrastructure, into a fit state for a charity that turns over £50 million and has 630 staff, rather than something that would embarrass a charity a tenth the size in places. It's not because they don't know they need to do it. The appetite is there. It's just the fact we haven't been able to do it. So that's the mission. That's how I plan to do it. If you know people who are interested in operations and Happy Manifesto, send them my way because I'll be recruiting soon. And at that point, I will stop waffling and take some questions if we have any. There we are. So say your name as well, please.
Bernadette.
Right, Bernadette.
How do you test for attitude? How did you know Maureen had the right attitude?
Yeah, I was referring to that Maureen, who has obviously got the right attitude to be working at Happy. But the person I recruited had the right attitude. Yeah, how do we do it? So now I'm not as advanced as Happy on this because I know they do a lot of get a person to do the job, right? And that
It's not always possible.
It's not always possible, particularly when that job is managing a finance team. But I try and replicate it. So what I do is I do scenario-based questions that allow us to see how the person responds to a situation rather than just saying what they have done. So there would have been no point me asking, this is Chatham House rule, isn't it? I think so. Mary, her name is. There was no point me asking Mary about her management experience because I already knew she didn't have any. So I created some scenarios to see what her reaction would be, and that helped us work out how she would navigate a situation.
For years we've been told not to do that because people can just lie, and the best way to test somebody's skill is to get them to give examples of how they've done things.
Yeah.
I know things come in circles
Yeah.
and I'm old, but you know,
So I'm getting older by the minute.
how, you know, asking people how they would do things isn't, they're not always going to,
I think it's a blend, right? So
yeah.
So, you know, for Mary to get that job, she had to show a certain level of competence. She had to answer questions about what she had done. But on the things that really mattered to me, which were, does this person have the right attitude to be able to manage in the culture we want? In some ways, even if I'd asked her what she'd done, she could have made that up as well. And someone can have a CV with 30 years of management on it, but if they're a bad manager, they're a bad manager. It adds nothing to me. So I want someone who comes to me. I'd much rather have someone with no management experience, but who I know is going to nurture talent and grow and do all the things and was speaking in the same kind of terms. It's not an exact science, and I don't always get it right. Like I've hired people who I thought have got the right attitude, and then it hasn't quite worked out. But that's okay. Like,
That's what probation period is for.
yeah, it's what a probation period is
It's the
for.
other way round as well. Like, I've gone into jobs being sold this amazing job and all of this.
Yeah.
And I've got there really keen.
Yeah.
And within 2 weeks I've gone, yeah, that's nothing like what
Yeah.
I was sold.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I think what you're touching on there is the need for that honesty because it's a two-way process. So I'm always honest with people about what they're coming into, right? I did a lot of due diligence on the job I've taken to see what was going on, you know? And I thought, well, that sounds good. Oh, rub my hands, that sounds exciting. That's exactly the sort of challenge I want to take on. It wouldn't have been for everyone. I'm just a bit unhinged like that, so it's good.
Following up a little bit with that question, I know often in the charity sector, if interview panels look at quite a rigorous scoring matrix that you have in front of you. How do you reflect the values piece in that?
Yeah, so there's two parts to this answer. One is, I think scoring matrices only have some value. It's much harder as an assessment of how the feeling you get from that person. And that is something I think that sometimes comes with practice and experience. But it's still useful because you still need some sort of objective measure. I find those things are much more useful where you're doing things about experience or what skills someone may have, less so. But let's not say it's impossible. So if I take the example of this recruitment and the questions we asked about how someone would respond to a scenario, we had in our mind kind of the optimum response. And so essentially how far somebody got to on that in their response towards the optimum response dictated the score we gave them, but we did that collectively. So we said, right, as a panel, what do we think? So rather than everyone scoring individually, we said, let's talk it through. What do we think? Because some of these things are subjective and people have different views, but I think what helped in that situation was everyone got what we were trying to do. That's going to be one of my challenges at Parkinson's UK is this is a new thing I'm introducing in some places. It's a fantastic organisation, don't get me wrong, like it's brilliant, but like some of these things that I'm trying to fix are just going to make it even better, right? So I need to try and work out how I can assess that without necessarily having a whole team of people who are like disciples of the Happy Manifesto yet. Yeah, well,
going to jump in.
And we're running out of time.
Yes,
Yeah,
we're
sorry.
running out of time. So can I just encourage the conversation to continue out in the cafe, make connections. I see you've got.
Find me on LinkedIn. There we go.
Yeah. I mean, there's lots to talk about. But before you go, though, a knickable.
A knickable.
A knickable, please.
I would say, can I give you two?
Oh, okay.
Sorry, I'm an accountant, I always want more. I think the first one is, I really encourage you, next time something goes wrong, take a deep breath and embody that, celebrate mistakes and see what result you get. Because the more you do it, the more it embeds, and you have to start somewhere. Even if it's not an official policy, just try it. And the other thing I would say is, when you are hiring, make it really, really clear that you're looking for people with potential and ambition and the right attitude, and then you will get that candidate flow through. If you're using agencies, tell them that's what you want. Tell them you don't want a load of CVs of people who are completely not a fit. You know, you've got to be really, really clear, and then you increase your chances of doing it and getting the right people. So, yeah.
Ben, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.